this manga is the reason why I hate anime, and I do really mean that because all it took was the cover art for this manga, Kagurabachi, and everyone already decided it was going to be the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever, and not in between. We didn't even let the first chapter drop before letting our mouths spew out all this garbage. And this is why I hate calling myself an anime fan sometimes, because the expectations of just the fandom in general at times can be very toxic. For example, we already had people calling this basically a Demon Slayer copycat, or for example, like the art looks lame, and I'm just like, let them cook. He isn't even done cleaning his utensils to start cooking. Why are we already judging something based on the cover? Like, let us see the bulk of the work first. And I guess that's why I titled the video the way I did. It's just because I wanted to get that off my chest. Because I just think people's expectations are unreasonable. Like, at least let them get through the first story arc before we have this whole conversation, you know? But anyways, we're gonna jump into the story, and I'm gonna be breaking down the first chapter because I thought it was pretty good. Not amazing, not the best thing ever, not the worst thing ever. I just thought it was pretty good, and I am excited to see what comes after. And I think that's okay. That's okay to say that. Alright, so we're gonna jump into the first panel, which is really simplistic. I mean, the cover, you have some colored pages with some amazing action to sort of excite you for what's to come. But for the most part, it is very much story setup. You're introduced towards our main character, Chihiro. And I like that he's sort of played as, he's the son to this famous swordsmith. And it's almost like a legacy. He's gonna take over the business of making these fantastic katanas that can be used in battle and have won wars in the past. And I just think that's a great introduction and sort of bringing you into this world. I love animation when it also adds so much more flair beyond just the action sequences, when it's more of this like the dialogue and the more plot heavy stuff going on. And you definitely see that with the swordsmithing, with the fires, the sparks, them actually forging the swords themselves. I thought was a really cool visual to look at. And we have to understand that art can be amazing outside of just the fighting sequences. It can also be something cool like forging swords. And I'm glad that we do get to see a little bit of that. We get sort of a deep look into who Chihiro's dad is, in terms of him being so very, very passionate about making swords, and really holds himself to high regard because he understands the weight of that, which we'll get into later with sort of another dialogue sequence. We do get sort of this funny comedic bit right after, which is him talking about the fish and how his father likes to talk about fish that he brought in, which was really fun. And it really serves a point later. Like, I'm glad that they reference the goldfish because it plays a bigger part later on in the chapter, which we'll see. But yeah, we go back to forging, and it's sort of intercutting both the fish, the flashbacks of how he got the fish, like the father got the fish and brought it home, to them making the sword. So it's almost like making a parallel to saying the goldfish and the katana are related in some regard, and you'll see why. And we get more forging, and then we get a visitor. And this visitor is when we get more of an introduction to who his dad was in the past, and why he is considered a hero because he helped forge these swords which were wielded in battle and helped the quote-unquote good guys win the war. Which I'm interested to see in why, or I'm interested to see why, wow, I'm tripping over my words today. I'm interested to see why some people are in power, so maybe we'll get something like something along the lines of, say, Rurouni Kenshin, which is also an anime about a swordsman, and how like the people who won the war necessarily didn't do the best things and actually caused a lot of the problems going into the new era. maybe it'll be the same thing in this regard, where the people who won the war weren't actually good people. Like maybe the heroes themselves, like the people who fought in battle were great, but their commanders maybe had ulterior motives, and that's why you have a lot of the problems in current day society that they have to overcome and fight through. But this is all just speculation at this point. Anyways, continuing on with the chapter, we get his friend who is very funny. He gets yelled at by Chihiro's dad, and he's like talking about, when he talks about sort of his backstory and his role in sort of the relationship on how they know each other. There's very much a focus on making sure that and this is where it gets brought back with the father's past, is the swords, he believes, and this is his mentality and his belief system, that they are complicit in everyone they murder with their swords. Since they are crafting these weapons, it's up to them to have that responsibility to make sure that these swords don't fall into the wrong hands, and they're used to strike down bad people, not innocent civilians. And I like that morality that basically is going to carry over to our main character, Chihiro, going forward in the story, and how his outlook on life, or his outlook in the story, is going to be centered around helping the innocent and making sure to kill the evildoers. Also very Kill Bill vibes I'm getting with sort of the sword play later on. Next we do have basically just more of a commitment to carrying that burden, which Chihiro basically solidifies, like, yeah, I understand this is our job, it's a legacy, and I will carry this burden of knowing that we have the responsibility to withhold as good swordsmiths. Then we get into our very, very plot-heavy action, which is 38 months later, which is a huge time skip. Let me just first off say that, because as we'll learn later, there's a lot that has changed since we were reading the story at the start and where we are now in the story. And yeah, it could have been a little bit jarring, but I appreciated that somehow they were able to make it make sense by including sort of the friend that visited their house and Chihiro, the main character, sort of being brought back into the fold after the time skip, but also referencing some things may have changed and some things may have happened in the past, which I'm sure they'll explore later, which I'm glad they at least leave that door open, which basically lets the audience know that we aren't going to be left in the dust. They're going to help us follow along the best way they can. And then we get the Yakuza, of course, and apparently there's an anti-Kurogumi movement, which is some form of, I guess, political rally that this group had formed because they were being oppressed by, I guess, this. I'm assuming that the Kurogumi movement, the Kurogumi is the Yakuza, so this movement was to basically drive them out because they control the city and everyone's terrified, but of course that doesn't work because they're powerless and they are basically getting murdered this chapter. And then I think the most interesting part about this is bringing in a sorcerer, because it really introduces magic into this world, as opposed to just making this a typical grounded story based on just swordsmiths and swordplay. This is gonna bring some more flair to the story. Now, this may be your cup of tea and it may not. It really depends on what you're feeling. But personally, what I've seen so far, I see that they're using the magic and sorcery as more of an enhancement rather than just, power scaling, laser beams, or crazy killing and stuff like that. Who knows, it may go a little bit crazier as we get more powerful villains, but that's something we all have to see. So just as a heads up, if you're looking for those types of stories, we get a torture scene with trees and roots, and it looks very painful because those needles look like knives poking into his skin, the person that they're torturing. And he has a cool line here where it's like, we must school them properly, which very anime villain, but very cool line nonetheless. Then we of course flash back to our two main central characters, Chihiro and then his dad's friend. And then we get sort of the introduction of basically them meeting the execution, seeing what the Yakuza have been doing to the city. And then it gets really interesting for me because at this point in the story, we don't know what their intentions are. All we know is that they're just traveling together and something happened. And my thought process was, oh, they're just gonna avoid the Yakuza because they have something else to take care of, and then they're going to encounter the Yakuza and have to fight them. But no, they're just straight up going to the Yakuza to murder them. And I thought that was pretty funny. So there's an awesome action sequences that happens. A bunch of people are murdered. Very cool. And there's a torture scene where they're bringing in the main villains, basically like, you have a kid sister, we're gonna bring her to get the information out of you by torturing her in front of you. Which is already an evil thing. It makes you hate the villains even more. But what I love is that they do it right as the heroes are about to arrive and basically save them. There's a cool shot in the doorway where he basically opens the door, gets sliced in half on the right side of his arm, limbs go flying, and the bad guys are freaking out because it's like, who's decimating all of our men? And it turns out to be our main hero. And he says one of the coolest lines that I've read so far, which is, I can't allow slime like you to wield a katana. And there's a cool panel of him. And of course they're like, we're gonna kill you! And then they all rush him, and you know that never works out. But then we get this amazing scene where we see the koi fish from the beginning, part of the swordsmanship, and he says black as part of his move, and he decimates them. And it's a great scene because all you see is just him going crazy. And as his dad's friend arrives at the door, he opens the door to see just bodies. And Chihiro is standing over the Yakuza leader with his sword pointed at him. And he says he wants to know about the sorcerers. And his response, of course, is, are you crazy? Do you know who they are? And he responds, I have to cut them down. Now, this is a great chapter. I very much enjoyed it. I think the introduction of our main character as sort of a swordsmith, and then him eventually becoming that warrior we see in the cover art, and of course the first few color pages of the manga, we get to see him at the end, which is really cool. But what I love, I think, the most about this is that it really takes its time. It doesn't give you too much, it gives you just a little look into this world that he's building, and I really appreciate that, because if you try to do too much exposition, if you try to introduce all the information about the war, all the information about these sorcerers or Yakuza, it's gonna get a little bit muddy. But what I appreciate about this is that the mangaka here, what's his name? Let me pull it up really quickly. Takuro Hokuzano. He does an amazing job of making sure that you are very focused in on what is happening at the current moment. Even if chapter 1 says mission, you don't really get that until the latter half of this chapter. And even then, it's really toned down to the point where it's very straightforward. And I think a lot of mangas nowadays, when they try and do too much, unless you are very much paying attention, it's easy to get lost in. And what I like about this one, at least this introduction, is it's keeping it very simple and very straightforward. And I think that's what you need in an introduction. Now, if he wants to get more complicated later on, he can absolutely do that. But for the building blocks, he wanted to make sure that he got the fundamentals down, and he absolutely did that here. But yeah, overall, if you want a good manga, if you don't mind sort of more magic in sort of swordsmanship, like in Demon Slayer or One Piece, this will be right up your alley. This one has terrific art already. The characters already seem likable with a lot more going on. Now, could you wish for more personality from these characters? Yeah, but I would hold our breath and wait for more chapters to go out so we can learn more about them before we start making those judgments. I like sort of just the build up of this bigger threat with the sorcerers and sort of the dangers that they could pose for a swordsman of this like high caliber of skill. And yeah, I just think going forward, the character designs are great, story is great, art is great. This could end up being a great manga. If, of course, you are into that. If you're more into more grounded stories, more samurai focused, or more swordsmanship without magic, I would check out more Vagabond if you're into that. But for this one, at least, this one's a pretty good one. And I would rate it out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10. I think it was pretty good. Is it incredible? Does it blow everything out of the water because it's so engaging, so hooking? It's such a great hook, no. But does it need to be? This is the first chapter. It doesn't need to be anything special. It just needs to catch your attention and make sure that you are invested in this world going forward. And that's pretty much it from today's video. If you like today's video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more content from me, I'm going to do this weekly because this is a weekly release. Please subscribe so you can stay updated. I also do anime breakdowns and yeah, I think that's just pretty much it. Thanks for watching.